There's a financial trap the enemy hides right inside your daily routine. And the most dangerous part? You don't notice it. It feels normal. It looks harmless. It even feels responsible. But slowly, quietly, it drains your peace, your focus, and your money until you wake up one day wondering, why does nothing in my life ever move forward? If you've been feeling stuck, delayed, blocked, or constantly fighting the same financial battles over and over again, this isn't random. This is a trap disguised as a habit. And today, you're going to finally see it. Porque once you identify this one hidden pattern, your entire financial life starts to shift. Every day, without thinking, you repeat the same pattern. You wake up, check your phone, rush through your routine, move from one task to the next, and tell yourself, I'll deal with my finances later. But later never comes. And that right there is the first trap. Because the enemy doesn't destroy your finances with disasters or dramatic events. He destroys them with distraction, with noise, with hurry, with tiny habits that feel normal, but slowly disconnect you from wisdom, discipline, and God's direction. You ignore the small expenses because they don't matter. You postpone the decisions that feel uncomfortable. You avoid looking at the numbers because they make you anxious. You convince yourself that you'll deal with your future once life feels calmer. But life never feels calmer. Because the trap is designed to keep you busy, not progressing. The enemy knows something you forget. If he can keep your mind overwhelmed, he can keep your finances unprotected. This is why God keeps warning his people, not through fear, but through clarity. Be alert. The danger is not outside. It's inside the routine you never question. And once you start to see this trap for what it really is, everything about your financial life begins to change. One of the most dangerous money traps isn't loud, obvious, or dramatic. It's subtle, respectable, even normal. It's the habit of emotional spending, not the big purchases, not the impulsive splurges, but the tiny financial escapes you use to numb stress. A treat after a long day, a little reward because you're overwhelmed, a quick purchase to feel in control of something, anything. You tell yourself, it's just $5. It's nothing. I deserve this. But here's the warning. It's never about the money, it's about the pattern. Because the enemy doesn't attack your finances through greed. He attacks them through avoidance. Every time you buy something to escape a feeling, you strengthen a reflex. When life gets uncomfortable, I spend. And that reflex is exactly what keeps you stuck. God isn't trying to restrict you. He's trying to protect you from the habit that quietly rewires your heart, so that money becomes a coping mechanism instead of a tool. Proverbs 25:28 says, like a city without walls is a person who lacks self-control. In other words, without discipline, your financial life has no protection. This is why God warns you early. Because the small emotional purchases today become the chains that hold your future tomorrow. But once you see the trap, you stop walking into it. There is a financial habit almost no one talks about. Because it doesn't look sinful, irresponsible, or dangerous. But spiritually, it's one of the most destructive traps of all. Ignoring the small instructions God gives you about your money. It happens quietly. You feel a nudge to stop a certain subscription, but you keep it just for convenience. You feel conviction about organizing your finances, but you delay it for weeks. You sense God telling you to save, to slow down, to steward better, but you brush it off with, I'll do it later. I know I should, but not right now. It's not that serious. And that tiny compromise, that I'll do it tomorrow, slowly becomes a spiritual pattern. Delayed obedience. And delayed obedience is still disobedience. Not because God is punishing you, but because every ignored instruction disconnects you from discernment. Jesus said, whoever can be trusted with little can be trusted with much. Luke 16:10. Meaning, if you keep postponing the small things, you're unknowingly postponing the blessing attached to them. This is why the enemy hides this trap so well. Because he knows God promotes those who are faithful with the small. And if he can keep you distracted long enough to ignore the small, your next level never arrives. When you feel that gentle conviction about your money, that's not guilt. That's guidance. It's God pulling you back before a mistake becomes a consequence. The question is, do you treat those whispers as optional or as protection? Because your future depends on the difference. There is a financial trap so subtle that most people fall into it without ever noticing. Trading peace for convenience. It sounds harmless. It even feels responsible. You buy things just to avoid discomfort. You overspend just to silence anxiety. You make quick decisions just to escape the feeling of pressure. But here's the spiritual danger. The enemy knows you will sacrifice anything if he can make you uncomfortable long enough. So he doesn't tempt you with greed. He tempts you with relief. Relief from boredom. Relief from stress. Relief from insecurity. Relief from comparison. Suddenly, your purchases stop being decisions and start becoming emotional anesthetics. You're not buying because you need it. You're buying because something inside you hurts. And every time you exchange peace for convenience, you weaken your discernment. Because peace is how God guides you, and pressure is how the enemy rushes you. This is why Isaiah 26:3 says, "You will keep in perfect peace those whose minds are steadfast." Not those who spend fast. Not those who react fast. Not those who escape fast. Those who stay steady. The enemy's trap is simple. If he can keep your emotions stirred, your wallet will follow. But God's warning is even clearer. Never make financial decisions from a place of fear, hurry, or emotional chaos. Because whatever you buy in pressure will eventually cost you in peace. Take a moment right now and ask yourself honestly, when was the last time I spent money from clarity, and not from emotion? That one question exposes the trap instantly. There is a financial habit that feels practical, modern, normal. But spiritually, it's one of the most dangerous traps. Making money decisions without inviting God into them. Not because God needs control of your bank account, but because the enemy wants control of your direction. And he knows this truth. If he can keep you self-reliant, he can keep you spiritually blind. So he convinces you, I already know what I'm doing. I don't need to pray about this. It's just a small purchase. It's just temporary. I'll fix it later. And slowly, your reasoning replaces your discernment. Your habits replace your faith. Your plans replace his guidance. You stop asking God, what do you want me to do? And start telling him, this is what I've already decided. But here's the warning. Any financial path God is not invited into will eventually lead somewhere he never intended you to be. Proverbs 3:6 says, in all your ways submit to him, and he will make your paths straight. Not the big decisions, not the emergencies, all. Because God sees traps you don't see. He hears conversations you didn't hear. He knows consequences you can't predict. The enemy hides this trap inside your confidence, your logic, your independence. Why? Because he knows the moment you stop asking God, you start leaning on yourself. And when you lean on yourself, you become predictable. Predictable in spending, predictable in mistakes, predictable in spiritual vulnerability. So here's the question God is asking you. When was the last time you invited me into your financial decisions? Because guidance doesn't come from urgency, from emotion, or from assumptions. It comes from submission. The moment you bring God back into your decisions, the direction of your life begins to shift. There is a financial trap the enemy uses not through shock, but through slow drift, not sudden rebellion, not obvious sin. Just tiny, harmless-looking steps that pull you away from God's protection inch by inch. It begins with small compromises. You stop tracking your spending. You stop praying before decisions. You stop paying attention to conviction. You stop checking where your peace disappears. Nothing dramatic happens, no big fall, no big warning, just distance. And that is exactly how the enemy works. He doesn't need you to run from God. He just needs you to stop noticing how far you've drifted. Because a distracted believer is easier to deceive than a rebellious one. This drift is dangerous for one reason. When your heart drifts, your decisions drift with it. You start normalizing what God never called you to normalize. You tolerate what he warned you not to tolerate. You excuse what he tried to correct. You explain away what he tried to protect you from. And then you wonder, why is my money stuck? Why do I keep repeating the same cycles? Why does it feel like every breakthrough is delayed? Because drifting leads to confusion. Confusion leads to compromise. Compromise leads to consequences. The Bible says in Hebrews 2:1, we must pay careful attention so we do not drift away. Notice the warning. Not fight, not run, not resist. Just pay attention. Because drifting is silent. It feels harmless. It feels normal. But spiritually, it is a trap designed to separate you from the clarity, peace, and discernment you need to handle your finances wisely. Here is the truth. The enemy doesn't need you to collapse. He only needs you to drift far enough to miss God's direction. God's warning is simple. If something in your financial life feels off, don't ignore it. Don't delay it. Don't numb it. Don't hope it fixes itself. Pay attention. Because drift is reversible, but only when you wake up to it. There is one truth few people want to face, but everyone eventually learns. God warns you before he promotes you. Not to scare you, not to shame you, but to prepare you. Because God will never place new blessings into hands that are still holding old traps. And that's why the enemy hides his financial traps inside your routine, your feelings, your habits, your justifications, your comfort. He knows the easiest way to kill your purpose is not through catastrophe, but through patterns. Patterns you don't question, habits you don't challenge, cycles you don't confront. But here's the shift. When God wants to move you forward, He shines a light on everything that has been quietly holding you back. Sometimes He exposes the trap. Sometimes He exposes the mindset. Sometimes He exposes the relationship. Sometimes He exposes you, not to punish you, but to position you. Because God cannot bless the version of you that keeps surrendering to the traps the enemy designs for your destruction. This is why your spirit feels uncomfortable lately. This is why your finances feel tight. This is why certain doors closed. This is why old habits suddenly feel heavy. You're not being attacked. You're being awakened. God is saying, you cannot take this with you where I'm sending you next. And if you ignore the warning, the trap becomes a cycle. But if you respond to the warning, the trap becomes a turning point. Every breakthrough begins with one moment of obedience. Every promotion begins with one step of alignment. Every new season begins with one decision. Will I keep feeding the trap, or finally step into the future God is trying to give me? Your life won't change by accident. It changes when you respond to the warning that was meant to save you. Before you leave this video, I need you to do one thing. Write, "I'm stepping out of the trap" in the comments. Not for the algorithm, but as a public declaration that you refuse to repeat the patterns the enemy used to hold you back. Your breakthrough might begin with that single act of obedience. So type it below. I'm stepping out of the trap, and let heaven see you mean it.